Now, this is a good audience and a brave audience. I thought when I looked at the clouds and the warnings about heavy rain, I thought the audience is going to disappear. But people in Houston are braver than that. It reminds me of, I was once in the rainiest place in the world. We all used to read about it in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's Cherrapunji in India. No longer, I think, but at one time it was. And I was there at that time. I visited. We have an ashram there. And it's a school, big school with hundreds of kids. So it was raining, no surprise. And so it's raining so much. And we have a concept in India called a rainy day when we're little kids. It's the happiest day of school kids' life. And suddenly it's too much rain and the school authorities declare it's a rainy day. No school today. You all get to go back home or you get to not to go to school. So I asked the monks there, it's a rainy day. You should tell the kids to go back home. And they laughed and they said, if you did that, then it would be a rainy day every day of the year. This is the normal here in Cherrapunji. And I'm very glad that you decided to go. I'll start with the chant and then we'll dive into the subject. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Vedanta. We hear the term again and again, but you know what the precise meaning of the term Vedanta? It is Upanishads. When we started studying Vedanta, we memorized the definition. There's a book called Vedanta Sara, the essence of the Vedanta, and it's a book of definitions. So those who are introduced to Vedanta, who learn it in a traditional way through Sanskrit text, it's like a manual, and we have to study it as novices. And I still remember memorizing the definition of Vedanta. Vedanta nama Upanishad pramanam. Vedanta is verily the source of spiritual knowledge called Upanishads. So that's one takeaway. Right here. What is Vedanta? And the most precise, accurate definition is Vedanta is Upanishads. Vedanta is equal to Upanishads. But then what are Upanishads? Upanishads are texts. So the textual basis of Vedanta is Upanishads. These texts, the Upanishads, they form part of the oldest collection of religious texts in the world. The texts called the Vedas, which are the foundational religious texts of the Hindus, of Hinduism. So our religion is Vedic religion. Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism is a Vedic religion and it's based on the Vedas. Now in the Vedas, you find these texts, part of them, you find these small texts, much smaller than the whole Vedas. You find these texts called the Upanishads. And what are these Upanishads? They contain the final, the highest, the most sophisticated teachings about spirituality and religion in Hinduism, in the Vedas. So the final teachings of the Vedas, the highest, the conclusive teachings of the Vedas, that's called Vedanta. The word Vedanta means end of the Vedas. So end doesn't literally mean the physical end. Sometimes these Upanishads are at the physical end of the Vedic collections, but sometimes not. Sometimes they are not really literally at the end. It's not always, sometimes, but not always the last chapter in the book. But it's the end in the sense of the highest or final. There's a Sanskrit word, Siddhanta. Final conclusion, Siddhanta. So the Siddhanta, the final conclusions, the ultimate teachings of the Vedas are found in the Upanishads and they are collectively called Vedanta. So now we know what Vedanta is. It's the Upanishads. And one more book which is central to Vedanta is of course the Bhagavad Gita. If you want one book to represent Hinduism, of course we would all say Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is based on the Upanishads. In fact, Sri Krishna liberally quotes from the Upanishads. So the Bhagavad Gita is a foundational text of Vedanta, but it is also based on the Upanishads. And there's one more, just for the sake of completion, let me mention it. It's called the Brahma Sutras, the Sutras of Brahman, which are also based on the Upanishads. So Upanishads is fundamental to Vedanta, and Upanishads is the essential teachings of the Vedas. If somebody wants to know what the what do the Vedas teach, you don't have to plow through the whole Vedas. I haven't. Very few people have. Because large portions of the Vedas are no longer operational in that sense, because they have been superseded by more by the kinds of religion which we are familiar with as modern Hindus. Like this, for example, Durgabari, the worship of Durga, is a Vedic deity, but it has developed and evolved over the centuries, over the millennia. But what remains essential to Hinduism is the Upanishads. There are a number of these texts, the Upanishads, and they are all together known as Vedanta, and they are essential or foundational to Hinduism. And of course, there are multiple schools of Vedanta. Many masters came afterwards and they wrote commentaries on the Upanishads. And so you get various flavors of Vedanta. There is the non-dual Vedanta, which I often teach and which I'll talk about today. But there are other schools of Vedanta, all equally based on the Upanishads. There is the so-called Vishishtadvaita Vedanta. There is the Dvaita Vedanta, Dvaitadvaita Vedanta, Shuddhadvaita Vedanta. What do they mean? Advaita means non-dual Vedanta. Dvaita means dualistic Vedanta. Vishishtadvaita, qualified monism or qualified non-dualism. Pure non-dualism, Shuddhadvaita. Or non-dual dualism, Dvaitadvaita Vedanta, and so on. But there are various schools, but they trace their descent, their sources back to Upanishads. Upanishads are many in number. First, a little note on the word Upanishad. Shankaracharya, he explains the Upanishad in one of the commentaries. I think it's in the Mundakopanishad commentary, Kathopanishad commentary. At the very beginning, he gives a derivation of the word Upanishad, his interpretation of the word Upanishad. So, Upa, Ni, Shat. You can split it up into three parts. Upa means near, coming near, close to the teacher, close to this knowledge. Upa. Upa literally means to come near and sit. Ni means clarity. So you study these things and then you understand them and it becomes a living reality for us. As Vivekananda said, assimilate this knowledge. That's the meaning of Ni, Nishchayena, with clarity, without any doubt, without any wrong conception. No wrong conceptions, no misconceptions, no lack of clarity also. So all of those are removed. That is called the word Nishchaya, which we have in most Indian languages. Clarity. So that is the second meaning. Yeah, that's the meaning of the second part. Upa, Ni. Sat. Shankaracharya gives three meanings for the word Shat. Visharana, Avasadana, Gati. Three meanings. One is it destroys the bondage of samsara. It frees us from limitation. It destroys our bondage. It loosens, even before destroying it, it loosens the bondages. It makes us freer even while you are studying and progressing in the spiritual path. And the third one is Gati. It takes you to Brahman or makes you realize your ultimate nature. Who are we and what is all this? The goal is to take us there. Take us there means literally, not physically. Gati in the sense of understanding, avagati. To understand or realize who we are and what all this is. So that's the meaning of Upanishad. That knowledge, where if we get clarity by going to the teacher and that knowledge, when we get clarity, we get freedom from the sufferings of the world are loosened, as it were. The bondage of this cycle of samsara is broken, and we realize who we are, our real nature, our identity with the ultimate reality that we are Brahman. So that's the meaning of the term Upanishad. It's knowledge. There are many Upanishads. There are long lists of Upanishads. Hanuman asks Ramachandra, how does a person who seeks liberation, how will that person get liberation? And Ramachandra replies to Hanuman, Mandukyam ekam alam mumukshunam vimuktaye. The Mandukya Upanishad is enough to give liberation to those who are seeking liberation. To Mumukshu, the one who is seeking liberation, moksha. For such a person, the Mandukya Upanishad is enough. Mandukya Upanishad, I'll come to that later, is the smallest of the Upanishads. Only 12 verses, or 12 mantras. Only 12 mantras, and smallest, but it is the most powerful of the Upanishads. It says that that itself, the smallest of the Upanishads, is enough to give liberation to anybody who wants liberation. And if that doesn't succeed, and then Ramachandra proceeds to give a syllabus of 108 Upanishads. If that doesn't succeed, then there are all of these. It goes on giving a progressive syllabus. If you count the whole list, 108 Upanishads are there. So immediately you feel I better get liberation by Mandukya, one Upanishad, the smallest one, if it can give me liberation. Of all these Upanishads, 10 are considered important because, at least in our order, in the Ramakrishna order, 10 are considered, not in the Ramakrishna order, in the Advaita Vedanta, in the non-dual Vedanta Sampradaya tradition. 10 are considered important, especially important, because Adi Shankaracharya, he wrote commentaries on them. He selected these Upanishads to write his Sanskrit commentaries called Bhashya, commentaries on them. So in our non-dual tradition, Advaita Vedanta tradition, these 10 Upanishads have become famous. They are known as major Upanishads, and in contrast with that, the rest are known as minor Upanishads. There's not really anything major or minor about them, but it's just a selection by Shankaracharya. So in our tradition, those were followers of the non-dual tradition, Advaita Vedanta. We concentrate on these 10. Not that we restrict ourselves to these 10, but we concentrate on these 10. And there's a cute little verse which gives us the syllabus. Ishakena katha prashna mundamandukya titirihi aitareyam cha chandogyam brihad aranyakam tatha. Ishopanishad, Kenopanishad, Kathopanishad, Ishakena katha prashna, Prashna Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, Aitiriya Upanishad, the Chandogya Upanishad, and the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So these 10 Upanishads, the smallest of them is the Mandukya with only 12 mantras, and the biggest of them is called Brihadaranyaka, is aptly named the Great Forest. Brihadaranyaka, the Great Forest book. So these are the main Upanishads, and generally in our tradition you study them, you try to understand them with the help of the commentary of Shankaracharya. The reason being, we can go directly to the texts, but in some cases the texts are fairly obvious, like the Kathopanishad, Mundakopanishad, more or less language is simple and direct. But in some of them, like the Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, and others also, language is elliptical. The Sanskrit, they're all in Sanskrit, but they're Vedic Sanskrit. A little difficult to understand if you just read the original or just the translation of the original. We need help. And so you have Shankaracharya's commentaries, and other commentaries are also there. So generally we study it with the help of the commentary of Shankaracharya. And all this is preliminary. What else do I say? Swami Tathagatanandaji, who was in the Vedanta Society of New York before me, among the many books he wrote, there was one wonderful book, which is The Journey of the Upanishads to the West. Journey of the Upanishads to the West. The Upanishads have always been studied in India, but until recently they were pretty esoteric. That means they were not generally taught to the public. Pandits studied them and monks studied them. That's why that led Vivekananda to say, the Vedanta which has been in the hands of a few scholars and in the hands of monks, I shall scatter it among the people of the world. I shall take it to the people of the world. The Vedanta which has been limited to mountain caves and forest dwellings, we meant ashrams, forest dwellings, I shall take that Vedanta to the cities of the world. So, but now it is available. And one part of the process was how it was transmitted to the West. A very interesting story. At one time in India, when the Mughal emperors ruled, there was the Mughal prince, Dara Shikoh. In those who studied Indian history, they know. Aurangzeb's elder brother. So Aurangzeb, who ultimately became the emperor, Aurangzeb was a fanatic. But Dara Shikoh was a very liberal Muslim. He was also Muslim, of course, but a very liberal Muslim and very interested in other religions and very deeply learned in Islam also, very scholarly. So he wanted to engage with, he sees all these people. For hundreds of years we have been ruling this land, and the people of this land, they belong to this Hindu religion. But what is Hindu religion in its depth? in its most sophisticated, deepest form. So when he heard about the Upanishads, he gave like grants, so royal grants. So you have university get research grants. He gave grants to Pandits in Banaras to translate the Upanishads into Persian, so that he could study it, and other nobles at the Mughal court could study it. And it was translated. Now this text was more or less lost until Darashuka never made it to the throne. Those who know the tragic story of Darashuka, he was liberal, but as so happens with good and liberal and accepting people, they get the short shrift by the more fanatical, more violent. So his younger brother had him killed. But this text survived. And years, centuries later, comes a young Frenchman, Anquetil Duperron from France. He had come in search of the ancient book of the Zoroastrians. And a lot of people today will look confused. What is all this search for book? Didn't they have Google? Just look it up. That's true. Just imagine the journey we have had. People went across oceans, traveled at the risk of their lives to recover one old, battered text written in a language which nobody understood or they didn't understand. Just for that. So this young man, he was 21, I think, and he traveled from France in the middle of the Anglo-French wars which were going on in India at that time. He travels to India to recover the ancient book of the Zoroastrians. Why Zoroastrians? That's a long story. Because at that time there was a search for the roots of civilization in Europe. So okay, we are all Christians, but where does the Christianity come from? Alright, there are these people who are Jews, from their religion of Christianity has come. But Judaism is not the beginning of religion in the Middle East, there was something else before that. And they heard of Zoroastrians. They only heard. In Europe, nobody had seen a Zoroastrian. In India, we have the Parsis. But in Europe, nobody had seen. Then they heard that the Zoroastrians actually exist in India. They do exist in Iran, but they have been wiped out. It's very difficult to access them. But in India, they exist peacefully. And their temples are there. And their books are there. So to understand our civilization, means the European civilization, we need to go back to the Middle East and go back to the roots of religion in the Middle East, which lies in Zoroastrianism. And the book can be found in India, maybe. And this young man travels across the oceans to find one old book, clearly written in a language which at that point he didn't understand. And he did find it, the Zendavesta. And he took that also later. Not with him, it was sent to him later. But he also found a book which he was not searching for. A book of curious old texts called Upanishads. And in a language Persian which he had learned. Translated by a forgotten, tragic Mughal prince. So he took that book back with him. And then he got it translated in Paris. He worked on it himself and he translated it. He lived in poverty. A very inspiring life. And he writes at the end of his life that as he lives and he dies in poverty, he used to burn old newspapers to warm himself in the Paris winter. He says, even though my circumstances are poor, but the wisdom that I have got from these unknown texts, that warms me, that gives me comfort. And he published it. He translated the Sanskrit text, which was translated into Persian. The Persian text which he got, he translated into Latin and published it as the book Upanishads. And why Upanishads? That's also a little there's a story after story, but let me go ahead. If anybody remembers, you can ask me why Upanishads later on. This book finally fell into the hands of the great German philosopher Schopenhauer. And Schopenhauer writes that these Upanishads are the solace of my life and they will be the solace of my death. Schopenhauer had a little dog whom he loved very much. He named the dog Atma. So, Schopenhauer, the solace of my life and will be the solace of my death, these Upanishads. Upanishads are the basis of our religion, of Hinduism, of Sanatana Dharma. Now, let's take a dive into the Upanishads. The first thing that we notice in the Upanishads is that they are dialogues. They are full of questions. So there's a student goes and asks a master a question. And the Upanishads are replies, answers to that question. So this form of dialogue, question and answer. What are the questions like? We know one famous story. There was this little boy, Nachiketa, who, because of some reason, his dad sent him to the house of death. So he goes to Yama, the Lord of Death. And there, because of certain, again, long story, cut it short, Yama gives him 3 boons. You waited 3 nights for me without food and drink, so I'll give you 3 boons. And Nachiketa asks for 3 boons. First he asks that, this is a little boy, this is a cute story. He says that, when I go back, my father shouldn't be mad at me. Now see the intelligence of the boy. He's asked for 2 things there. Nobody goes back from the house of death. He's taking it for granted. I'm going back to my dad. And he did. You can see Yama either smiling or rolling his eyes or both. So when I go back, it means you will go back. Second, remember, their dad shouldn't be, he's a little boy after all, that's important too. My father shouldn't be mad at me anymore. And Yama says, yes, alright, done. Second, he asks about this religion of his forefathers, of his father. He sees them performing huge Vedic fire sacrifices. So tell me about the best fire sacrifice. And Yama teaches him that. Then the third boon is the clincher. That's where the Upanishad begins. So when I talk about it today, I will bring forth some of the old language of the Upanishads for my own use so that I can translate accurately. But also it's good to listen to the original Vedic Sanskrit. So Nachiketa asks Yama, Yeyam vete vichikitsa manushye astitye ke nayam astiti chaike etad vidyam anishishtastvayaham varanadesha varastitiya. O Lord of Death, hear me that about death, there are these questions. Some say there is something after death, and others say there is nothing after death. We still have the question. And I would like to know the mystery of death. You are the best teacher. You are the Lord of Death. Who will know if you don't know? And so I would like to be taught this knowledge by you, this Vidya. I would like to be taught this knowledge by you. This, O Lord of Death, is the third of my 3 boons. It is my third boon which I asked. I remember, there's a funny story here. About 25 years ago, I was in a school of Ramakrishna Mission School, and there was these little boys, and in their annual program, in a stage like this, and the people were sitting and watching, they decided that they would do the play of Nachiketa and the Lord of Death. It's a favorite topic in India. So Nachiketa and the Lord of Death, Yama and Nachiketa, that would be the play. Unfortunately, we and the kids, we didn't put in enough work. So when the actual play started, it was sort of always hovering on the brink of disaster because they were forgetting their lines. I mean, the whole thing was very cute because the little kids and the audience enjoyed it thoroughly. They laughed and laughed when the kids messed up, and they bravely went on improvising. All the little kids. And so one thing after another, disaster after another. Finally, the third boon, and the Lord of Death, who asks Nachiketa, ask for the third boon. And somebody in the audience at the back said, tell him I don't want anything, then we'll be saved from this horrible play. Say I don't want anything. Which was unkind. So Nachiketa asks this question, the mystery of death. Another question. In the Kena Upanishad, by the way, the word Kena means by what? Or by whom? By whom? In the Kena Upanishad, it starts with the question. We don't know the name of the student, we don't know the name of the teacher. But there's a question and answer. It starts with the question. Keneshitam padati preshitam mana, keneshitam vacham, keneshitam pranam, kena prana prathama praiti yukta, keneshitam vacham imam vadanti, chakshushrotram kaudeva yunakti. Amazing question. All those millennia ago. Impelled by what? Illumined by what? Do we have these thoughts? Does the mind think? What makes the breath go? What is it that makes these eyes see and the ears hear? What is it that makes me speak? Now look at the question, the brilliance of the question. All one's life experiences Our thinking, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, speaking, our actions, all of what we consider life. He says, what's behind it all? Note, he's asking one thing. He doesn't even say, what's the secret of thinking, what's the secret of seeing, what's the secret of hearing, he's not asking about the physiology of the ears, he's not asking about the visual nerves or the visual cortex in the brain. He's asking, there is one thing behind all of this. What's that one thing? It's a question about consciousness. That awareness, that consciousness which gives us... See, if we were not conscious, even if the eyes are open, we would not see. Even if the ears are there, we would not hear. Even if we have hands and feet and a tongue, we would not speak, we would not walk, we would not grasp things with our hands. So consciousness is the one light behind all our activities, all our life. It is that which illumines all our life. This question about what is this consciousness which makes life possible? And it's such a brilliant question because right now we are getting around to asking that question. Just now, at the cusp of the 21st century, 20th, 21st century, consciousness studies has become a hot subject now. For many reasons. Advances in neuroscience, brain science, advances in computer science, and now advances in AI. Many reasons, suddenly this consciousness, what is consciousness? It's strange because we should have started there. That's closest to us. Who are we or what are we? Body, mind, but what is it that enables us to experience body and mind? This consciousness, we have started there. But we have to take the long route around. We have to first ask, what's all this? And investigate out into the world. And try to find out everything about heaven and earth. And science developed that way. And now we come, at the end of the 20th century, we are asking, what is consciousness? 5,000 years ago, they raised this question. Vedanta, and they investigated it, and they found answers. So much so, I love quoting this gentleman, Evan Thompson, who wrote this book. He's a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia. He wrote this book, Waking, Dreaming, Being, a science of consciousness. He draws from Vedanta, Buddhism, and modern neuroscience. He says, at the very beginning, consciousness studies is not a new subject. It started 5,000 years ago on the banks of the Ganges in India, in the texts called the Upanishads. And then he goes on to say, these texts, the Upanishads, are so important in human history, that our history, in human civilization, that our history should be dated before Upanishad and after Upanishad. Not AD, BC, but before Upanishad and after Upanishad. Now we Hindus generally are a very shrinking lot. We don't make big claims for ourselves. We're a little modest. But when a white person says it, it's all right. So we are happy with that. Before Upanishad and after Upanishad. And really, if you Google it, Oxford University Press recently released 5 most important questions in philosophy. It's a bit of a stunt to make philosophy popular again. But 5 most important questions in philosophy, if you Google it. Or 5 great unsolved questions in philosophy. 4 of the 5 deal with consciousness. First is Nachiketa's question, what happens after death? Not physically. Physically we know. But the conscious being, the sentient, what happens to that one? Is it gone completely or not? Exactly the question which Nachiketa asks Yamaraj. Another question was free will, again connected with our consciousness. Another question was, who am I? Directly. Another question was, I think, about brain and consciousness, something like that. Anyway, 4 out of the 5 questions were about consciousness. 1 was about global justice, a separate question. So this question they were asking. Now when we say these things, people say, get on with it. We all are eager to get on to the answer. But I think before getting on to the answer, one must appreciate the brilliance of the question. Often, as we study philosophy deeper and deeper, when we come to the end of the study, we begin to see how these answers were already in the questions. Questions are very important. So, here we have two questions. What happens after death? The little boy Nachiketa asks, and then starts the rest of the Katha Upanishad, what we study Upanishad. At the beginning of the Kena Upanishad, unknown student asks, what's it that makes this movie of my life possible? That I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, I think, I enjoy, I suffer, I understand, I wake, I dream, I sleep. All of this is made possible by what? One thing, consciousness. What is that? That question. Fundamental question. Another type of question we find in the Upanishads. And notice it, they will all lead to the same answer. We all have studied Vedanta, we all know. We're going to talk about Brahman. Yes, we are. But anyway, but look at the amazing questions. The second type of question, the third question which we have, it comes in Mundaka Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, where the student goes to the teacher and asks, Sir, what is that by knowing which everything is known? I know something, and by that everything in the universe becomes known, by knowing one thing. Shaunako havai mahashalo angirasam vidhivadupasanna papracha kasminno bhagavo vigyate sarvamidam vigyatam bhavati iti. Shaunaka is the name of the student. So he is described as a very successful man, Mahashala, the one who had great Vedic sacrificial altars. It says a lot because that means this is a person who is rich. It took a lot of money to be so religious and pious. So who is rich and well-to-do. Vedic sacrifices were performed by married people. So he is a middle-aged person possibly. And a family man because Vedic sacrifices required man and wife to perform. You know the story of Rama and the golden Sita and all of that. So he is a married man and a successful man, probably middle-aged. And he's curious, he has got these deep questions about philosophy. So now he goes and asks the teacher, Sir, what is it that by knowing which everything is known? Interesting question. Same question is asked in a different way. Shwetaketu is a young man who goes off to college, goes off Ivy League in those days. His father sends him off to college. He comes back in those days after 12 years. He comes back home. And when he's coming back home, his father sees him from a distance and sees that this boy has become arrogant. He feels, I know everything that there is to know. So in order to cut him down to size, make him modest, his father asks him, Well, son, did your teachers teach you that by knowing which everything is known? Shwetaketu is taken aback. I learned this and that, this is my syllabus. But there was never any subject which says if you know that, then everything is known. No, my teachers didn't know it. Probably they didn't know about this. And a little bit of a challenge there. Why don't you teach me? So the son asks the father that, why don't you teach me? So often in the Upanishads we find fathers teaching the children, or guru, the spiritual teacher, master teaching the students. What is that by knowing which everything is known? And the commentator Shankaracharya humorously adds there, Shwetaketu was afraid of being sent back to school. That's why he asked his father, you teach me. I'm not going back there again. So why don't you teach me? And then his father starts teaching. So these are the variety of questions that we find across the Upanishads, and we find the answers too. And based on those answers, we have Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism. The central philosophy of Hinduism. Go to any Hindu temple, anywhere, you will find some variety of Vedanta there or there, some variety of the other. Or allied systems like Tantra, here for example, the worship of Shakti. So some variety of Vedanta will be there. They all trace it back to these Upanishads, and the Upanishads start with these questions. What are the answers? What answers did we find? Alright, I'm going to do a TED Talk version. Quick 20-minute version of the Upanishads, these 5,000-year-old texts. We'll take a bird's eye view of the answers of Vedanta, of Upanishads. Mundaka Upanishad, let's go there. Shaunaka asks this question, Sir, what is that by knowing which everything is known? Now listen to the answer. The Rishi replies, Dvevid tasmai sahovacha, to him this master said, Tasmai sahovacha, dvevidye veditavye, iti hasmayad brahma vido vadanti, parachaiva paracha. So to him the master said, knowledge is of two kinds. Notice already is something interesting. Instead of directly replying, This is that by which, knowing which you know everything. Instead of saying that, he says knowledge is of two kinds. Because you ask knowing which, and you have a preconception about knowledge in your mind that needs to be deconstructed first. So knowledge is of two kinds. And he says this is what we have learned from the masters of Brahman, the Brahmavid, the knowers of Brahman. So always there is a humility. He's not saying this is my idea, I'm going to share with you. So in Vedanta, in Hinduism also, there is no, value set on, it's my idea, I came up with it. Immediately you're discounted in Hinduism. But if you say it comes all the way from the Vedas, from the hoary past, oh, then you've got something valuable to teach me. There's a distinct difference in attitude between the modern West, not the old West, not the European West, but America and India. So America is always forward-looking. Something new, latest, tell me. It must be great. India is just the opposite. It's new, latest, not worth it. It must be old. I remember this professor of philosophy, Professor J.N. Mahanti, Jitendranath Mahanti, passed away 2 years ago. Great philosopher of India. He taught here Western philosophy and Indian philosophy both. He met this German philosopher, I don't know if you've heard about her, Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, she wrote that book, The Banality of Evil. She was Jewish, and she escaped from Hitler's Germany, and she attended the trial of Adolf Eichmann and all of that. So it's an amazing story. But she came to the United States and she lived her last years here. So she was a very profound thinker, very deep thinker. So she told Professor Mahanti, and which I heard from him. One day, he met her and she said, do you know the difference between the Indian civilizational worldview and the Greek civilizational worldview, or the modern American worldview? So, in the Indian worldview, the truth comes down from ancient times. From the old to the new, it is manifested. And in the modern worldview, the American, going back to the Greek worldview, it is new. From nothing, something comes. What she said was, in your civilization worldview, nothing can come out of nothing. Something always comes out of something. So the source is important. What does it come out of? And in this worldview, the European, especially in the American civilization, is something comes out of nothing. So it's absolutely new creation is possible. And both have their advantages and disadvantages. Anyway, she put it out there. So the master is saying, I'm telling you something which has been handed down to me. So this is in the Upanishads, which is about 4,000 or 5,000 years old at least. There the master is saying, I'm telling you something which is ancient, which has come long ago. Really, knowledge is of two types. He says para, apara, the transcendental and the relative, the superior and the lower, the higher and the lower. Higher knowledge, para vidya, lower knowledge, apara vidya. Then he goes on to explain what he means. What is this lower knowledge? Tatra para rigveda, yajurveda, samaveda, atharvaveda, shiksha kalpa vyakaranam niruktam, chando jyotishamiti, athaparayaya tadaksharam adhigamyate. He says the lower knowledge is your Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, all the associated disciplines of grammar and prosody and how to do Vedic sacrifices and astronomy. You know why they were interested in astronomy? To calculate time for the Vedic sacrifices and so on. There's an interesting story associated with that. Not relevant, but let me just put it out there. About 30 years ago, I was talking with a senior monk, had just joined the order. I'd just done an MBA and I was on top of the world and just become a monk. And one night we were walking together, there was an object lesson in that for me. I said, we were taught that ancient Indians, we didn't have a sense of time. It's only when the British came, and this is actually taught. When the British came, they put the railway lines down and railway started in India. So you have a railway schedule, you need to know when the train comes. You can't say forenoon and afternoon, you can't do that. But you have to, at this particular time. So the Indians, for the first time, they had a timetable. 2:35 p.m. the train comes. Before that, Indians didn't have a precise timing system. It was not necessary. And the monk was very annoyed. He said, what are you talking about? You go all the way to the beginning of Indian civilization, the Vedic fire sacrifices, yajna. They are calculated down to the second. When should they start and when should they... Even now the puja in Durgabari, to the muhurta it is calculated. And this kind of system, dating system, was 5,000-6,000 years old at the very least. Forget your railways. Even before the European civilization got started, thousands of years before that, you had the most precise timing system. And they were interested in it for religious purposes, but they hadn't. Anyway, so all of this knowledge, and the master says it is lower knowledge. It's knowledge, but it's lower knowledge. And there is something called higher knowledge. So what is the higher knowledge? Notice, he has put all the so-called religion, Rig Veda and all of that in the lower knowledge. All of that is also lower knowledge. So your science, your religion, everything is lower knowledge. And then there is a higher knowledge. Yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate, that by which the imperishable is realized. Adhigamyate, realized. Not believed in, not worshipped, realized. Literally it means known. So that knowledge by which the imperishable, akshara, is known. And what is the akshara? He will explain later on. Vani was just saying that I read this and that. I am reading a collection of science fiction stories. I love science fiction, but I'm reading this gentleman who is the most brilliant name in American science fiction, world science fiction today, Ted Chiang. So his collection of short stories. So I read a story recently, just on the plane while coming here. It's called The Tower of Babylon. Very clever story. He's a very good writer. It's full of ideas, brilliant ideas. So this clever story is very clever. Ancient Babylon, there was the Tower of Babel, very high tower. So a miner is going to this Tower of Babylon. Thousands of people are employed in making this tower taller and taller and taller. And he says, I have been called there because the tower has now reached the dome of the sky and I'll have to break through the blue dome of the sky so that we can go through it, and then on top of that heaven will be there, then we can meet God. This is the idea. You might think that he's going to be disappointed because of course you can't break through, mine through them. But no, the story goes on. They climb and climb and climb, and then they come on the level of the moon, then they come on the level of the sun, then the sun is below them, the stars are all around them. In fact, they say one star came and hit the tower and it was very hot. And very clever story. And they actually reach the top, the dome. They reaches out and touches the blue dome of the sky. Then with the chisel and hammer, he breaks into this thing. And they're afraid there might be water above because it rains. So water might be collected. Then if they break into the reservoir, then they get flooded. And that's what happens. That he climbs into the above the sky, which he finds is a featureless plain. And then he goes further, and then somehow he falls into a water reservoir, and he's swept along, and then he gets up, he's down on a desert, and he asks, there's a caravan going past, he asks, where are we? Is this heaven? No, we are on our way to Babylon, to the city. He's back where he started. And so he makes a discovery about the shape of the world, that it's a closed cylinder. You might say, this is crazy, that's not what the world is like. But in his imagination, that's the world, that's the author's world. But the point he makes is this. After all the efforts in that ancient world, and he succeeded, and he found out what he wanted to know, he still didn't meet God. He still didn't understand the secret. He found out the shape of the world, which is a cylinder, closed cylinder. His point is, at the cutting edge of physics today, cosmology and particle physics and quarks and superstrings, we may know more and more and more. But we'll sort of be back in the same loop again, the same word, and still not knowing why it exists, what's the point of it all. That's the beauty of the story. It gives a completely different cosmology, something that is ancient. So his point is, maybe the Babylonian people, suppose they were right. The sky is a dome, earth is not round, it's like a cylinder or something like that. We are not much better off. We have understood this world in this way, and that man might have understood that world in that way. But still nobody knows the secret of why anything exists at all. This is the question they are asking. What's behind all of this? So there's an akshara. What is that akshara imperishable? So he explains there, the master, that it is existence itself. It's not a thing which exists. So it's not that one thing called God has created another thing called the world. No. The explanation of the world is in this word itself. Notice one thing, that this entire world, whatever we see, has one common characteristic. It exists. You ask a deeper question, not why this world exists, but what is existence itself? What is it to exist? There is a book, Why Does the World Exist? Jim Holt is a science reporter. Very, very beautiful book. What he does is, he goes around meeting physicists and mathematicians and theologians and philosophers and computer scientists at the cutting edge of every field in science and philosophy today. What is their explanation of why does anything exist at all? Not why this world exists. Some answer can be given. Why anything exists? Why does the universe exist at all? That's the question. The ultimate question. And he gets all these wonderful answers. I strongly recommend it. Not that you will get the answer, but at least the cutting edge thinking among physicists and philosophers and computer scientists. A computer scientist told him that everything has come from bits. The name of the chapter is It from Bit. It from Bit. And at the end of the book, he meets an American philosopher, Robert Nozick, who passed away a few years ago. Asks him this question. And you know what? I was searching for any mention of Vedanta at all. And Robert Nozick says, perhaps at the end of it, it's quite possible that the ancient Hindus were right. Atman is Brahman. That's the only answer. And that's the answer you get from the Upanishads Rishi. By the way, not that it matters, but I read somewhere, and you can look it up. The founder of Open AI, Robert Altman, Sam Altman. Somebody asked him, "Tell us something that you believe that we don't know," and he said, "Atman is Brahman." It's there. Look it up. It's on his Twitter or this X feed. It's there. All right. So this is what the Rishi tells him. Not OpenAI. It tells him that there is something called existence itself, because of which the universe, us, we all exist. And what is the connection between this Brahman? He calls it Akshara, the imperishable. From the imperishable to this world, and the Rishi gives, the teaching is this. Yatornanabhi, srijate grinhate cha, yatha pritivyam oshadhaya sambhavanti, yatha satas purushat keshalomani, tatha aksharat sambhavati ha vishwam. He says, just as from a spider spins a web and collects it in also. So, from this akshara, the entire universe is spun out and again withdrawn. These are very simple examples, but they have profound meaning. He's saying the source of this universe is both the material and the intelligent cause of this universe. It's not like a god making a universe out of some material, not like a cosmic potter making a universe like a pot out of clay. No, it's rather that ultimate reality from within itself projects this universe. So spider is interesting that way. The web which it projects is made out of the spider's own body. And spider at the same time is also the intelligent sentient being which spins and designs the web. So together, the ultimate reality is existence and also consciousness. Existence awareness. A simple example. People misunderstood. I remember reading an old English Indologist who was studying these ancient texts. He said the ancient Hindus worshipped the spider. No, we didn't. We worshipped every other thing, but spider I've never come across. Not that there would be any harm in worshipping the spider, it's a wonderful creature, but we didn't. That's just the fact. No, it's an example. The Sanskrit word yatha means like, as if, example. But a spider puts in a lot of effort to make a web. So does that ultimate reality put in a lot of effort to make this universe? The next example, second example. As from the earth, herbs and shrubs emerge effortlessly. The earth doesn't put forth any effort for all the vegetation to grow. So in that way, effortlessly, that reality manifests this universe. But then a question might arise. The earth is insentient. It's rocks and soil and clay. So is the ultimate reality something insentient? People make a mistake when they listen to Vedanta after some time, because our mind is conditioned by science. They say, oh, so this Brahman, Atman, is it some kind of energy? Is it like a particle? Somebody even said, is it like a gas? No, it's not an insentient thing. its awareness or exists being and awareness. So the next example is, as from a living human body effortlessly grows hair, yatha purushat keshalomani, tatha aksharat sambhavati vishwam. From the universe emerges from the akshara, or manifests from the akshara in that way. So many subtle points are being made here. Even the word which is used for the word, for the universe in Sanskrit, two words are used. One is, this word is called Vishwa. It's a common word in most Indian language, Vishwa. And another word is Jagat. Based on space, this universe is called Vishwa, that which is everywhere. Based on space. Based on time, this universe is called Jagat. The Sanskrit word Jagat means Gacchati ti Jagat, that which is continuously changing and going away. Samsara, Samsarati, that which is flowing away. So, time perspective, the same universe is called Jagat, that which goes, flows, slips away. And based on space perspective, it's called Vishwa, that which is all pervasive. And this emerges from Akshara. Another name for Akshara is Brahman, more common name. How? Through space and time. Desha, Kala, Nivitta, space, time and causation. Swami Vivekananda said, this universe is the wreckage of the infinite on the shores of space, time and causation. So one limitless existence, seen through time and space, becomes this limited universe, or appears as this limited universe. Now let's go back to the earlier question. We asked a question about who am I? In the Kena Upanishad, a different question was asked. That question was, by what do my thoughts, how do I think thoughts? How do I see? How do I hear? How do I smell? How do I touch? How do I speak? And the answer is very interesting again. Stunning answer. Shrotrasya shrotram manaso mano yad vachoha vachasau pranasya prana chakshushas chakshur atimuchya dhira pretyasmad lokadamrita bhavanti. What's the answer? You want to know how the eyes function, ears function, mind functions, tongue functions, speech functions? Yes, I want to know. It is because, listen carefully, it is because of the ear of the ear. What? Of the nose, of the eye. You know how speech functions? I know now. You will say speech of the speech. And then, so what does it mean? Ear of the ear, eye of the eye. It's saying that there is one reality which is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech. One reality. Because eye is different, ear is different, mind is different, speech is different. And yet it says behind all of them is one reality. Second, this one reality pervades all of them. It becomes the ear of the ear, eye of the eye, and so on. And makes them do what they do. It's like electricity and all these gadgets. So when you buy these gadgets from the shop, the light does not shine, the microphone doesn't amplify sound, the computer doesn't project or record. Yet what happens now? Look, the light is shining, the microphone is magnifying sound, amplifying sound, the air conditioner is cooling down the hall, the recorder is recording. What happened to them? Why are they doing all that? What is the one thing that went into all of them and made them do what they're doing? Electricity. We all know that. Electricity. It's the same force. But they all do different things as they are designed to do. Because they are designed in different ways. But they are all illumined or empowered by one force. Just an example. So you can say electricity is the light of the light, is the microphone of the microphone, is the recorder of the recorder, is the cooler of the air conditioner. Like that, in that sense. So there is one thing behind all our experiences, all our activities of life, which gives existence to this biological system and illumines it, makes it do what it is doing. That's an interesting way of referring to consciousness. It tells us many things. That consciousness is one thing. It's not like ears, tongue, skin, eyes. These are all different systems. But consciousness behind them all is one thing, just like electricity is one. And quite distinct from all of these, just as electricity is quite distinct from all these gadgets. And yet, it enters into all of them and makes them do what they are doing. So there is one reality which is distinct from the body, mind and senses, which is behind the body, mind and senses, and makes them do the diverse things that they are doing. Because of consciousness, I have the experience of thinking. Because of consciousness, I'm using words carefully, I have the experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. I have the experience of remembering. I have the experience of desiring, enjoying, suffering. All of it is possible because of consciousness. And yet it is one and distinct from all these systems. Giving rise to the possibility that when these systems fail, as they will do one day, just when the gadgets fail, electricity is not gone. Electricity is still there. One light goes, you plug in another one, it will shine. Similarly, when the body dies, when the systems shut down, we are not gone. Consciousness is still there. When the body deteriorates, we are not deteriorating. It's the system, the senses which are deteriorating. I mentioned our oldest member, Bill. So he says, Swami, my memory is not what it used to be. I said, don't worry, Bill, my memory is not what it used to be. So I'm half your age, a little more than half your age. It's a system which will deteriorate. As the body slows down, the brain slows down, aging, memory will slow down. Our sensory system, you will not see as well, you will not hear as well. That does not mean that you are deteriorating. It creates a gap, distance between the physical body, the biophysical system, and the sensory system. These are instruments. They are outer coverings. They are not me. You shouldn't feel bad. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It's a problem that has to be managed. But you are not falling apart. You are the witness of the body which used to have 20/20 vision. Now you are the witness, the consciousness which illumines the body, which requires glasses to see. You are fine. You are shining as much. As consciousness, you are not shining any less, because there is no old consciousness. There is no old consciousness, there is no young consciousness. Consciousness is constant. What happens? The Upanishad says, Atimutya dhira. Realizing this, that I am essentially not a body, not a mind, not a pair of eyes or ears, not a collection of these things. I am the light behind all of these. I am the light shining in and through all of this. Knowing this, in this body and mind, you transcend body and mind. Atimutya. Pretya asmad lokal amrito bhavanti. There are two meanings of this. One is, going beyond this body, at the death of the body, this enlightened one attains to immortality. That's the direct meaning. The more esoteric, deeper meaning is, in this body, transcending the body. What is transcending the body in the body? Here you are, in this body, you know you are not the body. Just as you are in the car and using the car, but you know you are not the car. You don't have to leave the car and to know that you are not the car. You are not the car. The body is a vehicle, a temporary one at that. Even the mind is a vehicle. It's an expression. It's your expression. It's not you. You transcend the body and the mind even while you are awake in this body, walking, talking, seeing. In that sense also you are still consciousness beyond the body-mind. Knowing this, realizing this, seeing yourself, this shift. Earlier what did we think? Yeah, I know about consciousness. I am a body. I have a mind, and yes, I have consciousness too. No. Now the shift is, I am not a body with consciousness. I am consciousness with a body. I am not a mind with consciousness. I am consciousness with a mind. I am that which is aware and functions as the light of the mind, light of the senses, light of the body. Another Upanishad, Kathopanishad and also Mundaka Upanishad, one of the highest points of Vedantic poetry. Swami Vivekananda loved this. He says, Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati na tatra suryo bhati na chandrataraka. There, the sun cannot illumine that, nor the moonlight, nor the starlight. The lightning does not illumine that. What to speak of this mortal fire? That shining, all of these shine. By its light, everything here is lit up. What are we talking about? You shining. All of these shine. By your light, everything here is lit up. You are consciousness itself, awareness itself, immortal being awareness, which shining, you are able to see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Without you, no seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. By which I mean, no conscious experience of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Example here. I put this to philosophers and computer scientists, AI people, and no answer is possible of this. Especially this new technology, AI, and others also, what computers have enabled us to do. You have systems now which can write essays for you, which can compose poems and songs for you. I saw this AI in the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York. It's the best collection of modern art in the world. And when you go in there, the first thing you will see is AI making modern art. And it's hypnotic. But is it art? See, it can affect you. From your perspective, it could be art because you see. You can read a story written by AI and be moved by it also. But from the AI's perspective, is there an aesthetic experience which is producing that art? No. When the AI is driving a car, I had this experience in Toronto, the gentleman who has bought a Tesla, and he took me in that in a full auto driving mode. So he took up his hands, he put his feet back, not in the lotus position, but and he programmed the car to take us from point A to point B. And the car did it. I was amazed. I was sitting next to him. I've read about it. And I've seen them in San Francisco also. They pull up next to you. There's nobody there. Sometimes there are passengers, sometimes there's no passenger, no driver, nothing. Just the car pulls up next to you. And it's driving better than you. Now, you are driving the car. You have an experience of light and sound and pressure and decisions being made fast in your mind. A conscious first-person experience of driving. Do you think the AI driving that car has that conscious first-person experience? No. So everything has been done mechanically, without any conscious experience. What is it that one thing the Kena Upanishad student might ask, going into the human driver, it produces all these experiences, which is not there in the machine. There's that one consciousness. So in Vedanta, you start with yourself first. You ask the question, who am I? You come to this one consciousness, and this one consciousness is also the akshara from which the entire universe has come. I just put it together and stop here. What did Shvetaketu's father teach the young man? He said, Sadeva Samya idamagrasid ekameva dvitiyam. At the beginning of this universe, there was one non-dual reality from which manifested this entire world, universe. Even now, there's that one non-dual reality. And you can imagine the teenage kid going, okay, so. And then his father drops the bombshell. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. You are that. 9 times his father tells him in the 6th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad. Thou art that. Tattvamasi, Tattvamasi. The one non-dual reality from which the universe has emerged. And you are that. You, the one consciousness, which seems to be a little being in this one little body. No, you are the reality of the universe. The entire universe appears in you. Shankaracharya says, like a city seen in a mirror. The entire universe appears in you, the consciousness, the one consciousness. You are that one non-dual reality, which was there at the beginning of the universe, which will be there at the end of the universe, which is there right now. You, by you, of course, we don't mean the person. That one impersonal consciousness. There we are all one. All of us are one consciousness. This is called Brahman. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the culmination comes when you realize that statement, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. These statements, I am Brahman, I am Atma Brahma, which you find in the Mandukya Upanishad, this very self is Brahman. In the Aitareya Upanishad you find Prajnanam Brahma, consciousness is the ultimate reality. So this is an overview of the teachings of the Upanishads. I went well over time, I think. But good. We can take questions now. Let me do a peace chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
So I know that Swamiji has said we've gone over time, but I have a question for all of you. Are you interested in staying for some question and answers? So what is time, Swamiji?
Okay.
If we can, those of you who have questions, please line up over here. Come forward to ask your question. And again, let's have one more collective agreement. Yes? Question means, in under 15 seconds, you are going to ask your question, and that means it ends with a question mark. State your name, and then ask a quick question so that we can allow Swamiji the opportunity to share the answers. So if you will stand over here, and we will take our question. You were here this morning, right? Papaji, excuse me, I promised her the first question. Yours is the second. Come, my dear. State your name and a quick question. One question. It's your favorite.
Namaste, Swamiji. I've been following you very closely on YouTube videos and very happy to see you in person today. So I'm very, very happy to listen to the gems of wisdom. So my name is Amita. I have one question, Swamiji. When we say Aham Brahmasmi, so you are not this mind, you are not this body, you are beyond this. But that feeling of being beyond is also in the mind, right? Mm. So how do you get rid of that attachment to mind when you are doing meditation? Or how do you know that mind is different than consciousness?
Yes. So two parts to it. How do you know that something is different from me? If it's an object to you, it's different from you. Follow this carefully. If you can see it as an object, if you can experience it as an object, as an other, then it must be different from you. So I can see the table as, make it even more precise. If you can use the word this, then it's different from you. This table is clearly different from you. It's not me. This shirt is clearly different from what I am. It's not me. But I can also say this body. So by that measure, this body is also not me. And more interesting, to make it more subtle, go inwards. Breath, breathing in, breathing out. This breath, it's different from you because I can say this. Then you go further. Thoughts, ideas, feelings. Can I say this thought, this feeling, this memory, this idea? I can. Then that feeling, that thought, that memory is not me. It is coming up in me, but it's not me. Then what am I? That which you are surely, and yet you cannot designate as this. That can only be awareness. Then you have to sit with this carefully, and then you will begin to see it makes sense. So you as awareness are not an object, and yet you do exist. When we do this, because we are used only to objects, because whatever we see, people and places and things, they're all objects. That's why we think, if it's not an object, it can't exist. But it does exist, and it's not an object, and it is you. Now the second question is, that the other side of the question was, but all this is mind. How do I know these are not just things? This, you're saying this is the observer of the mind or witness of the mind. That's also a thought in the mind, isn't it? All right. I'll give you a clue. Think about it. What you're asking is like, suppose I want to see my face, and I have a mirror, and I look at my face in the mirror, and say, oh, I understand what my face is. Now somebody might say, no, but that's just in the mirror. The reflected face is in the mirror. But for those who understand what a reflection is, it's telling you where your real face is, what your real face is like. Everything is true, the reflection is in the mirror, but it's reflecting a reality. Similarly, when we talk about things like witness consciousness, sakshi, the light of all lights, that's truly in the mind, but it's pointing to something which is the observer of the mind. That's why I love the Upanishad language, eye of the eye, mind of the mind. What does the eye do? It sees. Then what should the eye of the eye do? It should see the eyes. What should the mind of the mind do? It should know what does the mind do? It knows. What should the mind of the mind do? It should know the mind. Are you aware of your own thoughts? If you wanted, could you be aware of your own thoughts? You could be. What is that which is aware of your own thoughts? Think about it that way. Think especially with the mirror example. Yes. Please come.
Next, good question.
Maharaj, fantastic speech. Quick question, and you almost touched this, but I'm really interested on the mass and energy conversion and what's Vedanta's take on this. And there is a statement that Swamiji talked about this with Tesla, and a few years later Einstein also worked on mass energy conversion. What is the physical aspect of Vedanta's theory on this? Thank you.
Yeah. As far as all these questions go, I would say always refer it to science.
Yeah.
We live in an age of science, and we have wonderful answers from science. Luckily, those who lived in ancient times, 1,000 years back, 2,000, 3,000 years back, all they could go to was some kind of religious cosmology. Now we have wonderful answers. Vedanta's take on it is very interesting. It says there is one limitless ocean of existence, and it appears as this universe. So in this universe appearance, there is matter, there is energy, and all. In fact, the beauty of Vedanta is at no point does it run counter to our scientific understanding. That's the beauty of it. You can plug in modern science into Vedanta. As far as the cosmology is concerned, Vedanta is neutral about it. It will not run counter to any scientific understanding. Should we at all try to bring science and Vedanta together? There are two schools of thought on this. One is a classical Advaitic approach, which I've seen Swamis, who dismiss the whole effort, who say this is all Maya. You want to do science, go and do science, but don't do it in Vedanta. Vedanta is a method of teaching which will show you that you are Brahman and that's it. Questions about science, don't import it into Vedanta, like matter, energy, what you meant. So, that's one approach. But Vivekananda's approach was different.
Yes.
As you said, Nikola Tesla, so not the car, I mentioned the car earlier, but the scientist. He used to attend Swami Vivekananda's talks in the World Parliament of Religions. In fact, he would come and stand at the back. He had a pavilion of his own. Edison had a pavilion. Tesla had a pavilion in the display of the science section of the world's exposition, Columbian exposition. So he would shut down his own pavilion whenever Vivekananda was going to speak. And he would stand at the back of the hall, listen to Vivekananda's talk, and then go back to his pavilion. He wrote to Vivekananda. And they met, they had long discussions, and they had long correspondence also. And that correspondence is available. One of our Swamis, they discovered some old letter between Vivekananda and Tesla. I think Vivekananda wrote to Tesla, or Tesla wrote to Vivekananda. So there's a Tesla museum. And this Swami wrote to them, do you want it? They wrote back saying, we have the entire original correspondence here. So, Vivekananda was interested in how, not the Vedantic, but the ancient Sankhyan cosmology, how it fitted with modern scientific understanding, modern physics. Of course, at that time, unfortunately, physics was not advanced enough to reflect all this. Now, we are still not there, but it's more and more interesting. I asked Brian Greene, who is a very well-known cosmologist at Columbia University. His books are very popular. Elegant Universe and other books, are very nice books. So I asked him once at a book release, what do you think of these Vedantic cosmologies, the Vedic cosmologies? And he said, look, they are not science as we understand it today, but they are poetic expressions of the same scientific intuitions we are getting today. It's a big thing. What we are beginning to understand today, that has been expressed, but we are understanding it now in a much more detailed way with the language of mathematics and experimental data. They spoke of it in a poetic way. But in principle, it's the same thing they're speaking about. That's an amazing thing coming from a cutting-edge physicist.
Thank you, welcome to Houston, Swami, and great to hear you on the first day of Varahi Navratri. Thank you. Monaji said, make it a question. So my request, I'll put a question mark in the end. Knowledge, onset of knowledge is two types, if I have to crystallize it. One is like a knowledge of a mirage. Once I know it's a mirage, I can never get confused that it's not a mirage. Onset of knowledge is also like watching a movie. That movie is just a pixel on a screen, but it's a movie, and you can never get out of the movie experience. However, knowledge I have that it's not real will get dragged into the movie. However, we understand in Vedanta, it's not difficult to say the universal substance is same.
Okay, good question.
But we can never get out of the movie experience. So how to get the movie experience of life into the mirage experience of life? Thank you.
First of all, the examples. Let's clarify the examples. You are never confused by the movie also. When you know it's a movie, when you say you cannot get out of the movie, you're actually out of the movie. When we are watching the movie, we are not in the movie. We don't think we are a character in the movie. We watch the movie and we enjoy the movie, even a tragedy we enjoy because we know it's a movie. You can see King Kong coming and destroying New York in the movie screen. And you can enjoy it, you can clap at the special effects. But if really even a small monkey entered this movie theater, people would run. Why? Because nobody is confused about the movie. We know a movie is a movie. Just like when you recognize the mirage as a mirage, it will never confuse you. Similarly, when the movie is seen as a movie, it will. But what you are asking is, how do we make life into that movie or a mirage? Whether you at all want to make it that way or not. We will want to make it if we find something higher or better than life. Then only this world will, or life will appear as a movie or a mirage. How do we do that? I'm glad you asked it, because one thing I forgot to mention, in all these wonderful ideas, what does Vedanta, what do the Upanishads say about practice? How do you actually do this? And in the Vedantic Upanishad, Yajnavalkya is talking to his wife, and he tells her, my dear, the way to realize this is, Shrotabhya Mantabhya Nididhyasitabhya. Listen to these truths first. That means study it thoroughly. One. Second, Mantabhya. Think about it, argue it out, understand it, get clarity. Third, Nididhyasitabhya, which is just a fancy word for dhyana, meditation. Meditate on it. In these ways, you will realize that what will happen? Drashtabhya, Atma Vare Drashtabhya. You should see it, make it a living experience. So not something just I've heard, or nothing, something that I've understood the arguments, or I've just meditated upon it. No, it's become a living experience, just like this is a living experience. So like this seems to be real. It's not something we have just heard about. It's not something we are thinking about as an idea, not something that we are arguing about. We are living it. So the Upanishadic realization of the Atma, I am beyond body and mind, Chidananda Rupa Shivoham, it should become a living experience. How? Shrotabhya Mantabhya Nididhyasitabhya. Atma Vare Drashtabhya. My dear, he says, the self has to be realized. It has to be seen, literally, it has to be seen. Not with these eyes, but you have to see that I am that. And the way to do it is, when you study it, what do? You overcome the question, you answer the question, what is it all about? Today the question was, what are the Upanishads all about? And we have got some idea now. This is hearing. But once you get some idea, the next problem will be, I've heard it, but I have many confusions. It's not clear to me. Then you must think about it. You must argue about it. Ask those questions. Get the questions answered and clarified. So in the second stage, we know what the Upanishad teaches, and now we understand it also. Because I can always say, I know something, but I don't get it. I can tell you what the book says, but I don't get it. So now I can say, I can tell you what the Upanishads say, and also I understand what it says. I can teach you. But I can still say, I know what the Upanishads say, I understand it also. It's not a living reality for me. As somebody said, you're still the same old dude. Am I enlightened? Am I living free? Jivan Mukta? No, I don't think so. So that will come the next stage when what we have studied and understood, clarity is there. Stay with that clarity through meditation techniques. Then you will suddenly have a breakthrough. You will see, like he says, Atma Vare Drashtabhya. You see for yourself, oh, this is a fact. Then it becomes undeniable. Then and only then this world becomes a movie for you. It will continue. Like the movie will continue, it will continue. When you are awake, there will be a movie. When you are dreaming, there will be a movie. When you fall asleep, movie will shut down temporarily. When you wake up, movie will start again. But it will be a movie. Just as in a movie you are not confused, here also you will never be confused. Alright, the last two questions.
Namaskar, Swamiji, Amit sir. The influence of Upanishad on Ravi Thakur in a very macroscopic way, in a broad way.
So I am not a Rabindranath Tagore scholar, which is a big disqualification in a audience of Bengalis. So you have to be a bit of a Rabindranath expert. But I can tell you one very touching story. So after the publication of the English translation of the Gitanjali, which was after the First World War, and a British lady wrote to Rabindranath Tagore. She was a widow, her husband had died, and she had one son who was unfortunately killed in the First World War. And she was completely alone in the world. And she writes to Rabindranath Tagore that, "Sir, by reading your collection of poems, I have got great peace of heart. In my heart, I've got great peace." I'm thanking him. Now, Rabindranath Tagore reflects. This lady who lives in a foreign land, so far away, reading a translation of my poems in her tragic life, she's entirely alone in life, and she has suffered so much in life. What is it that I've written in my poems that gives peace to her? What is there in my poems? And then he himself writes, I realized, of course, my poetry is based on the Upanishads. It is the peace of the Upanishads which is flowing to her. No wonder she feels that peace. He learned it from Devendranath Tagore. From childhood he was immersed in the Upanishadic thought. A lot of his worship songs, puja songs, they are imbued with the spirit of the Upanishads. In beautiful Bengali, in very lyrical Bengali, but many of the Upanishadic ideas are flowing through that. Thank you.
My name is Kaushik Chatterjee. My question is, I spoke about consciousness, so what is subconsciousness?
What is consciousness, subconsciousness? Here little deliberation on terms should be done. Because when we use the English word consciousness, it's not quite what is meant by Upanishads or by Vedanta, or by, in fact, any school of Indian philosophy. Because when we say consciousness in English, or we do say consciousness studies today, what are you studying? You're studying thinking, memory, perception, ideas, pleasure, pain, personality. All of these come under the ambit of consciousness studies, including awareness also. But this is not at all so in Upanishads, or in Vedanta, or in other schools of Indian philosophy also. Indian philosophy makes a clear distinction between consciousness and mind. So, what is the distinction between consciousness and mind? Anything that you can classify as this thought, this memory, this idea, this perception, they are all mind. And that to which they are appearing is consciousness. So it makes a clear distinction between mind and consciousness. So creativity, is it consciousness or mind? In Vedanta it will be mind. In modern consciousness studies, also in English, it's an ambiguous term. It includes, like an umbrella term which includes everything. Okay. So when you say conscious in English, basically what you mean is mind. Now when you use the word subconscious in a Freudian sense, for example, what you mean is something, the Bengali word is close to it. Abochetan mon. Subconscious mind. Subconscious does not mean below consciousness. Avachetan chetanmay, avachetan mon. So it is something that is not arising to the level of the conscious mind. That part of the mind which is illumined by consciousness. So your question reduces to a question about the mind, not a question about consciousness. Now what is that? So fine, you might say fine, that's all right, but tell about this, what we call a subconscious mind, what do you call it in Vedanta? So Vedanta does not deal directly with it, but yoga psychology deals with it, Patanjali yoga. So there we call it samskaras. So there is these traces, these tendencies which exist, we are not conscious of right now, but these tendencies are there. Those samskaras are called, the collection of samskaras, tendencies, that is called subconscious mind. That will be the equivalent of the subconscious mind. All right, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.